I make no excuses. My actions are my voice. I have no enemies. My opponent is my teacher. I need no deceitful tricks. My character is my sword. I think not of quitting. My courage is my secret weapon. I know not of defeat. My experience becomes my strength. This is the Kaijudo Code, and back in 2004, it was the formal introduction to the Western world of the game that would change everything. Hello and welcome to Errata Text, the news segment expanding upon the 7 deadly sins of trading card games. In these videos, I will talk in depth about a lot of other game design concepts such as card rarity, booster composition, and so on, but I'd like to start by talking about one of the foundational pillars of the modern TCG landscape. So first, a bit of backstory. In 1993, mathematician Richard Garfield created Magic the Gathering, and along with it, the entire concept of the trading card game, where trading cards aren't just cool things to collect, but a series of game pieces used to build custom decks of cards to use in games against other players. Magic, as its name implies, is a game where players clash using mystical beasts, powerful spells, and ancient relics. Sounds awesome, right? But then you remember this game was made by a mathematician, so of course it's pretty complicated. Folks who might have originally found it interesting then get turned away by concepts like instant speed, timing, the stack, priority, banding, effect resolution, etc. This, along with the fantasy aesthetic, are partially why the early wave of trading card games, which I refer to as the Wild West era, got pushed straight into the geek pile and stayed there for basically a decade. But then, at the turn of the millennium, something happened. Within a span of less than 2 years, the world got hit by the 1-2 punch of Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!, both of which were backed by blockbuster franchises that ushered in an entirely new gaming demographic: children. And not just the geeky children who would probably later get into Magic, but most children. It quickly became the playground game and school banning item of choice. These two games, now known as the other members of the trading card game Big Three, triggered the second big wave of trading card games. Any sort of remotely kid-friendly brand was given a trading card game in an effort to cash in, with a few gems among the garbage, and Magic found itself kinda lost in the lurch up against these other games geared at a more general audience. Seeing as these two rivals both emerged from Japan, Magic's developer, Wizards of the Coast, teamed up with their Japanese associates at Takara Tomy to attempt to create a game that distills Magic the Gathering into its bare essence, specifically to compete in this more casual-friendly market. It was released in America in 2004, but due to low sales fell to the 2-year curse and was discontinued in 2006. However, this game is one that has a lot of sway, and many modern card games can trace their origins to it. So what is this game? How does it work? And why, if it got canned in 2006, am I speaking about it in the present tense? Well, that's because they are still printing it. This game is called Duel Masters, and this is its legacy. Duel Masters was a result of this Ends of the Earth dream team, a streamlined experience that brought about a ton of new ideas and mechanics that have influenced many game designers, particularly out of Japan. Unlike Magic the Gathering's focus on muted colors and realistic styled artwork, Duel Master cards are bright, almost garishly colored, with a variety of bold, anime-inspired artworks done by artists also known for their work on games like Pokemon. Yeah, Duel Masters struggled in the United States, but it has such a strong grip in the land of the rising sun that for a long time it rivaled even the likes of the Big Three in its presence. It has an ongoing TV show, a manga series, and even a bunch of crossover cards with other Takara Tomy brands like Zoids, WeCross, and yes, even Magic the Gathering itself. But it's how it innovated on the systems of Magic the Gathering that are the most notable. Perhaps I should break down the basics of Magic a little better to show how it's done. In Magic, the primary win condition is to reduce your opponent's life points to 0 from their starting total of 20. This is accomplished by attacking them with monsters while casting spells to gain an edge, some of which even stay in play permanently or even counteract other cards that your opponent might have played. There are also these special artifacts, which work in nearly any deck and behave like creatures or permanent spells. Each card has a casting cost, with stronger cards having higher costs to temper the progression of a player's field, as well as special colored icons which mean that part of that cost can only be paid for with mana of the matching color. For example, my old unlimited air elemental has a combined cost or converted mana cost of 5, 3 of which can be paid for with mana of any color and 2 of which must be paid for with blue mana. This mana is produced by land cards, special cards that get shuffled into the deck and produce 1 mana of a certain color each turn. You can only add 1 land card to your resource area per turn, which gives a gentle slope to how much power a player has to work with throughout the game. So, with that breakdown in place, let's see how Duel Masters simplified things. Okay, so the most obvious one is over here. Mana costs have changed from a series of symbols to just a number, and land cards have vanished completely. So how is that supposed to work? How can you still have mana costs, but no land cards? Well, this is where we get one of the 2 big innovations Duel Masters is most known for, any card as resource. You see, the problem with land cards is that they are really clunky. A player will often wind up with either too many or too few of them at a time, and the need for a clutch play can be dashed against the rocks when a desperate player pulls a resource card instead of something they need. Lands kinda suck, and many a card game has sold itself on not needing them, Duel Masters included. It means that you can pack your entire deck with cards that let you make a play, and your top deck can nearly always have a shot at turning things around. But ditching resource cards comes with its own perils. The slow ramping of power, done in a self-tracking way with nice hard reminders of how they work, helps keep a balanced back and forth between players, and by removing these cards, a new form of moderation is needed, or else a game can dissolve into who is better at playing solitaire on turn 1. So here's where we get Duel Masters' solution. Every card also doubles as a land card. On your turn, you may pick any one card from your hand and place it upside down in your resource row. You see how these cards have a little inverted 1 printed on the bottom? This is to show that the card is now a resource card. Mana costs have also been converted to flat numbers, with the rule being that at least one of the cards you use to pay the cost must match the card's color. That's it, just 1. A lot easier to read and remember, while also keeping the structure provided by color division. It's a pretty sweet setup, giving deck builders some space to include more situational cards and meaning that they will always be able to advance their resource row. But even this method has its hangups, as now the choice of which card to add to the row can be an agonizing one, as every card now has the opportunity to be useful, making this choice a longer one than it probably needs to be. It also means that you cannot have special resources, and I don't mean multicolored resources, Duel Masters has those too, I mean ones with unique and special effects which have useful abilities despite the usual downside of delaying your resources or coming at a price. But most agree that the upsides to the system far outweigh the downsides, and other games have experimented with similar systems. Flesh and Blood gave each card a resource value, with stronger cards providing less energy that you can use to pay costs. Score's version of Bleach, and later Force of Will, have a neat little system where the resource cards go in a separate deck. But I find the most interesting system comes from Hearthstone's predecessor, the World of Warcraft TCG. This game also uses any card as resource set face down, with class and faction acting as the structure points, but there are special quest cards which enter the row face up. They can still be used as resources, but they also offer a small challenge that a player can finish to flip the quest face down and claim a special reward, giving us splashable special resources in an any card as resource game. These are neat, and I wish I saw these experimented with more often. The other big innovation Duel Masters brought, and one that I have mentioned on this channel before, is the shield and trigger system. Determining a win condition based on battle has always been a tricky thing to do in card games, and it usually boils down to reducing some total of life points to 0. Some games tried to drop the need to track this by simply turning the deck into your life points, something I have pointed out the perils of in another video. The only game to successfully put a twist on this before Duel Masters was Pokémon with the prize card system. At the start of the game, you set aside 6 cards from your deck, and each time you score a knockout, which you get by depleting a Pokémon's hit points, you draw one of them. Draw all 6, and you win. Now, this system works thematically, as it's meant to represent the 6 Pokémon players can carry with them in the video games, but it still has some flaws. While it is a self-tracking win condition, the rest of the game still uses a life point system for the individual Pokémon involved. It also has a problem in that it rewards the winner. This is another thing I've talked about called the snowball effect, which is a phenomenon where if somebody builds a strong presence on the table, they can continue to build on their advantage while squashing any resistance their opponent might muster, helped in part by the mechanics of the game. The prize cards give the player who just got one step closer to winning an extra bonus. Granted, card advantage is not nearly the thing in Pokemon as it is in other games, so it's not as big a deal, but Duel Masters still managed something incredible by turning this system on its head. In Duel Masters, rather than setting a life point total or putting down some prize cards, you instead deal the top 5 cards of your deck in front of you. These cards are your shields. Every time one of your opponent's monsters makes it past your monsters to hit you in the face, they instead break one of these shields, which then moves to your hand. And once they deplete all 5 of these, one more smack and you're down. This serves 2 functions. 1, it lets players track their life points without the need for extra stuff, making Duel Masters an immaculate game you can play with just the deck. But unlike Pokemon, it's the losing player who gets the card advantage in exchange. Their opponent might be one step closer to winning, but they might have just been given something that can turn things around. Unlike Pokemon or other games that tend to slide these cards over to the side of the table, Duel Masters puts these cards smack dab in the center, so everybody always knows everybody else's current health. It's not just clearly defined, delineating the space between your minions and your resources, but it's like bam, 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 bam! Come at me, bro! The shield mechanic is not only clear, it's also loud. Oh, hey, I've been fishing for that one. But it's worth noting how the placement of cards in normal setup can come across in a game, such as that game I don't like. Now, in most games where you have an avatar-style card which is supposed to represent you, said card typically goes in the back, as close to you as possible, with a big row of minions in front of it to protect it. The fact that, in that game I don't like, you put your avatar character out in front, that carries with it a certain volume. The use of shields grounds the field. It creates a sense of space and gives your opponent a nice shell game they have to pick through, as sometimes those shield cards are concealing a trap. Now, before I talk about the always amazing trigger system, I want to take a step back to talk about a card game concept that I have mentioned, but never really elaborated upon, and that is card speed. Now, a card's speed specifically refers to when you are allowed to play it. When it comes to card speed, the generally accepted terms are sorcery speed and instant speed, with instant being the obvious inspiration behind the term. A sorcery speed card is slow. You can only play a sorcery speed card on your turn, and usually only when your monsters aren't fighting in the battle phase. It implies a careful ritual or something time-consuming to prepare. On the other hand, an instant speed card, as its name might imply, can be played at virtually any time. You can play it on your main phase, your battle phase, your opponent's battle phase, even right after your opponent plays a card. Now, on a base level, the concept of instant speed cards is an awesome concept. They're unpredictable, they let you respond to the actions an opponent is taking. You can bolt their bird out of nowhere and shatter their Phyrexian Colossus the instant it gets played. But with this freedom comes complexity. I mean, if a bunch of cards get played at once, how the heck do you untangle that mess? Can I still use my bird's ability if it gets bolted? What happens if the creature I'm playing a mutation onto gets destroyed? How the heck does a Raios or a Tommy Ascendant even work? This is where we get into a ton of fun concepts like effect resolution and the stack, which generates fun situations like fizzles and missed timing and a whole lot of homework to see what happens when a card with this effect gets destroyed mid-resolution. And don't even get me started on priority. So yeah, Duel Masters took all of this and threw it in the trash. And artifacts. And enchantments. And whatever the heck this is supposed to be. For the sake of simplicity, Duel Masters has just 2 kinds of cards, creatures and spells, all of which are cast at sorcery speed, so this craziness can never really happen. What's the difference between these 2 card types? Creatures stay in play, spells go away. Easy. If Magic the Gathering spell system is Persona 5, Duel Masters is Paper Mario. My stance has always been that the best games have simple systems, and Duel Masters is about as simple as you can get. With cards reduced to 2 main types that get played at the same speed, it is very easy for people to learn. But wait a minute, haven't we lost something here? Didn't the cards at instant speed give you something to do to respond to your opponent even when it isn't your turn? doesn't it take away the ability for players to counter the moves your opponents are making? Well, yeah, kinda. But fortunately, Duel Masters had a response for this as well. It actually has two, one of which I talked about in my life decking video, and the other is a special creature ability that you can only use on your opponent's turn. Blocker. When an opponent attacks you with one of their creatures, you can choose one of your readied creatures with Blocker to essentially get in the way of that attack. In Magic, all creatures basically have Blocker, but in Duel Masters, making it a special ability tells the player right on the card that they have this option without needing to consult the rules. And you know that whole facilitating counterplay thing I was talking about before. But that's not the only chance you'll have to do something on your opponent's turn, because this row of cards isn't just your life points, it's also a potential minefield. The other half of the shield system is the trigger system. When a shield is destroyed and sent to your hand, if that card has the trigger ability, you have the option to play that card right away at no cost. These could be things like deck searches, creature destruction, or even effects that flat out shut your opponent down for the turn. They add a bit of interesting tension and unpredictability to the game, possibly setting a confident attacker onto their back foot and forcing them to improvise while also giving a small reprieve to the losing player. Now, while some people might say that giving someone such a powerful effect like that of Holy Awe to your opponent for free is unbalanced and unfair, I'd say that's hardly true. For while as likely as you are to have Holy Awe as your last shield on your opponent's first attack, there's just as high a probability that it will be the first shield they break on turn 2 when they only have one attacker anyway. Or it might never go off. You only get 5 shields after all. The trigger system is surprising, but not super reliable. Trigger cards also tend to be more expensive than their non-trigger counterparts, and there are very few creature cards with shield trigger, so you can't build an entire deck out of them. These methods of design, allowing you some counterplay on your opponent's turn without all that timing insanity, help Duel Masters distill the best parts of Magic the Gathering. So why did it flop? At least in America. Well, there were a few reasons. First of all, this was the early 2000s, a time that I call the Flood, where there were just so many games coming out due to the success of Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! That it was hard to get a word in edgewise when it came to introducing a new game. People also turned out to not really be in the mood for a brightly colored, anime-looking, watered-down version of Magic. Yet. There was a push to sell this game to children as well, with a hefty mall tour, which I sadly cannot find pictorial proof of, just the cards that got signed by the artist they flew in for the occasion, and a TV show. But remember, this was an early 2000s dub, so...
That's right, Stu. The first 2,000 kids to enter the stadium get a free tube of hair gel for that pointy-haired Shobu look.
Yeah. It also didn't really have any of the punch or stakes you'd find in Yu-Gi-Oh! Stories, and it was probably skewed a bit younger than the sort of crowd who would prefer the card game. In English, it also received a gag dub, where things like plot and nuance are removed in favor of weird jokes and non sequiturs. It made the game come across as kinda lame. Like, what even is this?
Go on, man, ask her. You're Rakuda. This may be your only chance. She's so new, she doesn't yet think you're a nerd. Just ask her. Who am I kidding? I'm just gonna stand here and look cute. Girls never go for cute. Oh, sure, they say they want a guy who will make them laugh, but in the end, they all go for the dangerous ones like Shobu. That lucky kid. How I hate him, hey!
But it wasn't a total wash. Like I said, it did gangbusters in Japan and is still a card store mainstay even today. The fact that Magic the Gathering didn't have the stake in the Japanese markets that it did in America also helped, as the competition was less vicious. There was, however, an attempt to bring Duel Masters back to the US, though in a flawed way, removing most of the innovations Duel Masters had made up until that point, particularly the mana source icon, and renaming the game to kaijudo. While a lot of the mechanics that made Duel Masters great remained intact, to the point that I would say it's okay to grab kaijudo product if you want to try the game out, it still felt like something was lost in the translation, almost as though it was ashamed of its source material. This was not helped by the cartoon show, one centering on this Mary Sue named Ray. To borrow the definition from this video, a Mary Sue is a character who is a literary black hole around which the universe and characters bend in order to appease. To wit, when Ray is allowed to join the secret Kaijudo Society, he is told quite clearly that he is not allowed to break a single rule or he will be thrown out. Ray then proceeds to break like 17 rules on day 1 and faces no punishment. Add in odd market pressures and a lack of familiarity, and you have the game succumbing to the 2-year curse for the second time in America. This time likely for good, unless something changes over at Hasbro and we get Duel Masters unfiltered over here. Or at least some of the neato crossover cards they do in Magic. So, yeah, Duel Masters may not have made a very big splash outside of Asia, but the ripples it created in the world of game design are impossible to deny. Don't believe me? Just take a look at the games that use its mechanics. Quite a list, right? Duel Masters is a game that carries a lot of weight. It's well designed, but was poorly publicized, giving us a good example of the perils of making your own game. It's a game built on an ethos of good sportsmanship, wonder, and creativity. And the reason so many other games drew inspiration from it is because of that solid foundation. Games that aim to have a streamlined experience, immaculate play, and a dash of spontaneity have a perfect set of groundworks in this humble little game made almost 20 years ago. If you've never played it, the blue box from the original run and the demo and starter decks from Kaijudo are all still pretty affordable. It's a fantastic lesson in simplicity and accessibility, and as one of the founding pillars of many a card game, it's worthy of study. So, if the spirit moves you, feel free to get in the battle zone. Join us next time on Errata Text.